Hello, friends. I wanted to share with you all today a little bit about canine nutrition, just the foundations of it, why it matters, different options that you have, and all that good stuff. Gonna try to keep it fairly simple and just kind of lay out a foundation of why it's important and what your options for feeding your dog are. This is not something that many of us really think about that often. And if we do, it's like, well, which brand am I going to buy? Which dog food bag do I need to get off the shelf when I go to the pet store? Which specialty vet food do I need? And I want to encourage you to think about your dog and who they are and how their body is made and what kind of nutrition will best benefit it. And honestly, in the end, the most important thing is that our dogs have food and that they're fed and that they're fed enough and that they're healthy and that they're alive. But some of us don't ever even know that there are other options for feeding our dogs. And so that is what I'm presenting to you today, kind of an informal way. I kind of wanted it to feel almost like a little mini podcast slash a little lesson. This goes along with a newsletter that I put out on nutrition that will break it down and will outline it. So I'm going to kind of follow along with that newsletter. Sometimes it's easier to digest information from hearing it and from hearing somebody talk about it rather than reading it. So I wanted to put out both forms of learning so that we can learn alongside each other. So canine nutrition is a somewhat controversial topic in the dog world. For many reasons, just like human nutrition, right? We have intermittent fasting, and we have keto, and we have carnivore, and we have vegetarian, and everybody thinks that they're right. Oh, hello, can you go lay down? Hi. Everybody thinks that their version of nutrition is the right one, and that everyone else is wrong, or that theirs is better. But what matters in the end is that our bodies are nourished and that we're fueled to do the activities that we want to do in life. And so we need to be constantly learning and improving, and we have to be willing to admit when, I tried this and that didn't really work, and so I tried this, and we're just trying things, and we're growing and we're learning as we go. The same thing for our dogs. The only difference for them is that they, for the most part, don't actually get to choose what they eat. And I say for the most part because I'm thinking of Silas, my lab, who would live off of goose poop if he were allowed. But for the most part, they don't actually get to choose what they eat. They get to eat what is placed in front of them, which is whatever we have chosen to buy for them. So it's a part of our responsibility as dog owners to consider what we're buying for them, to do our research, to be willing to hearing new information when it comes out, or to be willing to hear different perspectives. And that's, a good and healthy way to live most of our lives. So following along with my outline so that we stay on topic and not ramble. Nutrition matters a lot, especially for our dogs in health. In something that I thought about was not only their lifespan, because when you feed your dog the appropriate nutrition, you can actually extend the span of their life, that meaning that they can live longer. There's studies that I will actually link in my newsletter that show that if your dog is properly nourished, then they can live up to 2.5 years longer than if they aren't. And that's a pretty significant amount, enough to make me consider and to do research on, what does properly nourished mean? Along with that, we want to extend our dog's lifespan, but we also want to expand their health span. So I would be thrilled if my dog lived longer, yes, but not if they're not healthy. If they have all of these issues, if they have severe allergies and they're itching, they're licking their paws, they have neurological issues, or if they had cancer, if they had allergies. I don't want my dog to just live longer. I want them to also be healthier, and I want them to have a long and healthy life. I want to see them thrive. And nutrition is it's part of the foundation of this thriving. And so I think it's worth considering. It's worth researching all of that. In order to love our dogs well, we must remain curious and eager to learn and how to better care for them. Even if I used to feed kibble, for example, which is just regular dog food off the shelf. I went to the pet store, I bought the bag, dumped out. I looked in the feeding guidelines and I saw, okay, it said feed X amount, so I'm gonna feed X amount, and I'm like, this is meeting all their nutrition. And then I started thinking about it. I started reading books, which I will also link. I started seeing things online. It's become a little more popularized if you're in the right areas online. But I saw that and thought about that. Dogs are animals. And if you see any animal out in the wild or even in the zoo, do you see them eating hard, dry biscuits that can sit on the shelf for years and not go bad? And so it's a little suspicious to me. It's worth considering. So nutrition can impact so many things. It can impact their seasonal allergies, as I said before. It can impact their daily behavior. And we'll get more into this in a couple weeks. I'll break it down and how it can impact behavior, because I am a dog trainer and you all know I like to talk about behavior. Part of this is considering their nutrition. It's kind of like if you feed a kid Fruit Loops every day for breakfast, you might not get the same results as if you feed them eggs. Or when they go to grandma's house and they get donuts, you might be dealing with the consequences of that. It's the same thing with our dogs. And then I think that's important to consider, as many of us are dealing with different behaviors that we may or may not like in our dogs. How is their nutrition impacting them? And then it can even impact, just like we talked about, their health span. So whether or not they get cancers when they get older and things like that. It can create the resiliency in their bodies against different illnesses, against different cancers, against allergies. And then along with that, it impacts the epigenetics, which we'll get into that more later. But that's basically to say you are born with this foundation. This is who your dog is. But there's little bits in that can be influenced by the inputs, to put it really simply. And that means that we have to think about these things, especially if we want to change any kind of undesirable behaviors in them, or if they're really struggling, then we might consider their nutrition. But we're getting off topic. One part that I want you to consider is the when, the where, and the how. Every bit matters in when, where, and how we're feeding our dogs. These small routines add up, and they add up pretty quickly, and there's a lot of evidence to show that it's important. For example, feeding our dogs once a day rather than twice a day is actually shown to positively impact their metabolism and their body mass. And that's a pretty simple thing we can do for most of us. If you have a lab, it's a little bit of a struggle for a couple of weeks, but I think it's worth considering that if you feed them maybe in the morning, they'll have energies for the whole day, they'll rest better at night, their digestion will be better, and their metabolism will be positively impacted. It can also improve longevity and improve cognition. And so we have more information on that, but just to keep it simplified, feeding the appropriate amount of food for their breed, weight, and activity can prevent obesity, which, as we said before, can shorten their lifespan for up to 2.5 years, which is quite a lot. Feeding in the morning versus the evening, giving too many snacks or treats. It can be a sneaky way to get lots of extra calories, kind of like when you open that bag of chips and you're like, oh, I'm just gonna have a little bit, just one handful, and then suddenly before you know it, half the bag is gone. Feeding our dogs treats can be kind of the same thing. So for every dog, that's going to vary. We want to feed them in an appropriate way for them, for their body. It's going to take an adjustment period. So for my lab stylist, I decided he was a little bit overweight, getting a little chunky, just like labs do, which doesn't make it okay though. So I started feeding him less food than what he was getting. No, actually less food than what is said to feed on the recommended thing. And so because he tends to carry a lot more weight, he gets less food than he should. And then I also feed him only in the morning, and that seems to help his rest. It seems to help his energy throughout the day, and it helps his digestion, and most of all, it helps his metabolism because we want to keep him nice and healthy for a long, long life. Let's see, daily food options. So this is the most controversial part, but I'm just going to list them out from less good to better and then best. So, and with that, I think that it varies depending on the dog, but we need to consider that they are dogs and we need to feed what is best for them, not what is most convenient or what is the cheapest option or what we have been feeding forever. And so this is basically just to spark some thoughts, just to get the brains rolling. So the first option is going to be kibble. This is what most people feed their dogs, I would say, at least in the US. Not all kibbles are the same, just like, not all of our food is the same. But I would say most of them are lacking in true nutrition. It might say on the bag, oh, it has this X amount of vitamins, but most of that is they've taken meat scraps, all of that. They have processed it heavily to the point where there's no nutrition left, and then they have added vitamins. And that might keep them alive. It will sustain their bodies, but often it will create a whole host of other problems. And keeping somebody alive is not the same as helping them thrive. So, just your consideration, if you must feed kibble, which some people don't have many other choices, you do the best that you can with what you have, and that is okay. But if you must feed kibble, I would say you have two options. One, feed the cheapest kibble available, the cheapest one you can find, and add as many whole foods as you can. The goal with this is to add as much diversity and add as many whole foods as you can. And that could mean like veggie scraps, it could mean meat scraps, it could mean eggs, it could mean a can of sardines. Just however you can get more nutrients, more whole foods, more real stuff into your dog's bowl. And then option 2 would be to feed a really high quality kibble that is less cooked, or a raw bowl, which is a freeze-dried raw food. That is a little bit more of a convenient option if you wanted to just scoop and serve. That is definitely more convenient, while it is also more pricey. So those are your options for kibble. And your next option is lightly cooked. I would say this is kind of a medium option. Probably it's not the best option, but it's also not the worst option. It really heavily depends on what kind you get, because there are some that are heavily cooked, just like kibble, and then a bunch of vitamins added into them. And that's not really the goal, right? The goal is to be feeding whole, fresh foods from the earth. Because your dog is from the earth, they're from nature, and they're meant to be eating things from the earth. It is better than kibble because it's lightly cooked or less cooked. It's not dry biscuits. It retains more moisture, it retains more nutrients and all of that. But I would say be careful about brands. And if you make it at home, be aware that you will have to formalize it and create it specifically following a recipe to ensure that they're getting all the nutrients, because dogs' nutrients are different than ours. So the third option is a raw diet. A raw diet is the most biologically appropriate, meaning that your dog's body is made to digest whole animals. And you might be like, well, that's nasty. But it's the truth, and it's what our dogs' bodies are made for. So I recently learned that their physical makeup is 98% or more than that, like a gray wolf's. Meaning that a gray wolf's DNA and your dog's DNA are very, very similar. They have the teeth, they have the digestive tract, they have the stomach acid. All of that is the same, and they're meant to eat prey. Your dog is a predator animal, and so they are made to digest prey. Now, with that, I also learned that our dogs are opportunistic or facultative carnivores, meaning that they can eat carbs. They have adapted enough by living alongside of us that they can eat carbs and they can live off of them if needed. But that means that they don't actually need carbs to live, which might seem like a shock because we've been told, oh, your dog needs carbs, they need rice, they need corn, they need wheat. They don't actually need carbs to live, because they are a facultative carnivore. And if you want to read more about this, there's a lot of information on the Feed Real Institute website, on the Dr. Ian Billinghurst website, and he has a really good book. The Forever Dog website and book, excellent detailed information on all of this. But basically your dog really thrives off of meat, bones, muscle meat, tendons and tissues, organ meats, all of those things that we think, oh yuck, we don't want them to eat that, are the things that they actually really need. These can be purchased in a pre-made mix, which is easier because it's measured out and it's predetermined what nutrients they require and then formulated according to their requirements. So that's a much easier option, but it is more cost effective to make it yourself if you have the capacity to, and if that's an obstacle to feeding raw, because the pre-mades can be pretty pricey. Some benefits of feeding raw, in case you need more convincing: it keeps their body healthier. It can eliminate allergies, seasonal allergies, because their body is it's better equipped to handle those things. It can prevent sickness and deterioration, especially in like the joints and the muscles as they get older. It can help keep their teeth clean, and their poops are smaller, basically odorless, and because they're all like natural materials, they kind of solidify and then turn into like a powder and deteriorate within a few days. So I don't have to clean up the yard if I'm feeding raw either, because it just goes back into the earth the way that it was designed to. It also keeps them better hydrated, and so they won't drink quite as much water because they're getting the hydration from the food, rather than like with kibble, it's so dry that they just drink and drink and drink because they're trying to moisturize their bodies. And so those are the options that you have for feeding your dog: kibble, lightly cooked, and raw, or like freeze dried. I kind of count that in a category as like between kibble and feeding raw, but just do the best that you can with what you have. I just want to make sure that you have the options available to you, that you know how your dog's body is made. If you're struggling with behavior, or they seem to be hyperactive, or like sometimes people will joke like, oh, my dog has ADHD. Some of that can be due to their nutrition or lack thereof, from getting too many sugars or carbs. And so if we're struggling with behavior, especially because, dog trainer, think about behavior, I would highly recommend at least considering a more whole foods based diet, as it can make a huge difference. And we'll go over that later, but I just wanted to present the options to you. if you have any questions, please let me know. If you would like the full breakdown, sign up for my newsletter on the sign up thing on my bio, whatever you call that. And in the meantime, it is nerve-wracking to hear all these things and to know, okay, well, where do I get started? Start with adding just some whole foods to your diet. Dog's diet. Add a can of sardines. Add your veggie tops, like my carrot tops. I put them in my dog's food. Add a couple of eggs, just raw eggs. And start there. This doesn't have to be super difficult. And then as you get used to it, you get more comfortable, then do a little bit more, do a little bit more. Or if you want a complete overhaul, go to Feed Real Institute. They have courses and workshops where they teach you how to do it. In the future, my goal is to get certified through them, and then I can actually help you all in how to do it, especially those of you who have done in-person training with me or who do online training, that I can give you instruction on how to do it, because I believe it has such an impact on the dog's behavior and on how they learn and on how they absorb the information that we're trying to teach them. And so let me know if you have any questions. I really appreciate you all being here, and I appreciate you watching this video, and I will see you next time.